to be clear, in everything he's said about the vaccine so far, even the stuff that's not really about the vaccine, but is somehow related to the vaccine, I guess, because trust the science, bro, it has been points about why people shouldn't get vaccinated, or how dangerous the vaccine is, or how ineffective it is. I have yet to see him put forward a single post or anything about, hey, and here's all the data showing the vaccine is effective, even though the vast majority of the data of respectability that's out there shows the vaccine to be extremely effective. Extremely effective. And you don't even need to necessarily believe the studies to see that. Let's get straight into it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the JonTron stuff. So if you guys don't know who JonTron is one of the former Game Grumps, which was a Let's Play channel. And then eventually, you know, he kind of sprawled out into his own thing with the JonTron show. He reviews old media content and video games, and he's one of those dudes, you know, oh wow, let's play my old favorite retro game and make jokes about it, you know, the types. I like a lot of them. I'm more of an Only Plays person, but JonTron has made his own staple. And then, out of nowhere, he decided, you know what? I think I'm gonna go a little alt-right today, and had a very long conversation with Destiny, where he talked about like how, for example, one of the things he said was, I believe it was that rich black people commit more crimes than poor white people, which is statistically just inaccurate to the furthest extent. No factual basis to that, whatever. But the purpose of him stating that statistic was, of course, to state that there was something inherent about black people that made them more, you know, accustomed to crime than white people. And so he got a lot of backlash for it. Destiny gave him a thrashing. And then he kind of stopped talking about politics for a while. And now, years later, what is this, like? It's been almost 3 years now. 3 years later, JonTron has dragged himself out back into the public quorum to say to the world, I have some opinions on the vaccine. He did this, I believe, yesterday, and he tweeted out this video, which we're going to take a look at quick.
So now we have two vaccines that are really quite effective.
Oh, and he tweeted it out with the message, imagine having a single inquiry regarding the science TM, my dudes.
The mRNA vaccine, highly effective.
Extraordinarily efficacious, 94 to 95% for mild to moderate disease, and virtually 100% efficacious.
Because the real world effectiveness is even more impressive than the results of the clinical trial.
Shot. We've got to make sure we clarify that with people. It has nothing to do with whether or not it's effective. We know it's highly effective. Highly effective.
So, this video to a lot of people could be seen as very convincing. I mean, oh my goodness, did you see how many articles that were in front of my face? Did you see how the numbers slowly went down? You see all these article headlines that are very concerning if you have taken the vaccine or are thinking about taking the vaccine. But there's two things I would like to point out here. Number one, he's showing article headlines. And headlines of articles are meant to be something to grab your attention and drag you in, so you're not getting the full context of said articles. I remember when I was at the Freer Fest, Destiny said something which I thought made a lot of sense, and I think it's something that everybody should live by, even though Destiny, of course, is not the first person to say this. It's that, like, just read the article. Don't just consume the headline. That's what the vast majority of people do. Just read the article, and you'll probably know more about a subject than 90% of people who have tried to engage with this, because they'll just read the article and just go about their day. So just showing the headline is ineffective for that reason, number one. Here's the second thing. Here's the second problem I have with this. A lot of this is, you'll see this part, you won't see a logo. For this one, you do. You see it's CNN, but you'll see like stuff like this. Health and Science, Kevin Stein, and you just see a share. You don't see what this is from. You don't know if this is a reputable publication. You don't know if this is like Science and Health or fucking InfoWars. You have no clue what it is. It's a bunch of headlines, and some of these you get to check. Some of them you don't know. And I'm sure many of these are reputable sources. But when you don't include the source or where this is from and you just include the headline, then I have no clue if this is a reputable source or it's going to be like China like created AIDS.com. You have no clue. And here's the third thing. The problem with these videos is that they'll throw these data points and numbers at you so fast and so quickly that you don't have time to process it all. And since you don't have time to process it all, you just assume, okay, this must be true, or maybe if one or two things in here are untrue. I mean, there's so much, you know? But number one, just because somebody throws a bunch of pieces of information at you does not mean all those pieces of information are true, accurate, and are not just being strung together particularly to create a narrative. If you get a bunch of headlines, you can easily just string those together to create a narrative with headlines which are purposefully flamboyant and eye-catchy. But it also means you miss the finer details. One great example of this would be the date of publication, which one of these in here was Japan halts vaccine after 4 children death. Oh my God, children dying? Well, that's terrible. Nobody wants to see kids die. I mean, personally, I'm not a Jeffrey Dahmer type. I am not a member of the Jeffrey Dahmer lobby group. I personally am of the lobby group that wants children to be in the not dead category, unlike many who still support the war in Yemen. But let's zoom in down here for a moment. Let's just zoom in down here. Do you see that right there? The date of publication, March 7th, 2011. This is from 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. Now,
occurred is occurred.
It might have felt like COVID has been around for a while, you know? It has, late 2011, we're going on to 2022 right now. That's a long period of time. But COVID-19 has not been wrecking shit since 2011, okay? Japan in 2011 had a lot bigger problems than COVID-19. Notably, I think, what was it? Wasn't it the tsunami around that time? When was the tsunami in Japan? Tsunami, Japan. When did that happen? Oh, that was 2011. So yeah. Japan had other issues besides COVID-19 in 2011. It wasn't a vaccine deaths particularly. So when somebody throws these many article headlines at you, always be concerned, because they're not showing you the contents of the article. They're many times not showing you the source of said article. They're going to be nitpicking articles, particularly to create a certain narrative. They're not practicing just like, oh, let's get as many facts as possible and display to you. They're doing a kind of crooked version of historiography, just trying to create a narrative to serve their own interests. And of course, you miss the finer details with stuff like this, where I'm sure that if we went through all these articles, we would find more and more and more issues with the narrative being put forward. But you don't even need to look that far. You can just look straight at the article headlines where I guess this was forgotten to be edited out. This is from 2011, completely unrelated to COVID. I also want to put forward that he just threw a bunch of studies at you, not saying what the study was done by, how the study was done, what institutions were involved, what professionals were involved, if it was cross-examined afterwards, if there was peer review. None of that was put forward. So if you can just grab any study in the world and throw it to the public, then yes, you can find a study to agree with you on any issue in the world. I can right now get you studies that saying climate change is a hoax. Now, maybe many of the people involved in the study are tied to the Exxon Corporation. Maybe they're tied to oil and gas interests. Maybe they're a bunch of kooks. But I could find you a ton of articles saying that climate change is a hoax and don't worry, we should actually drill more oil. In fact, I can also find you articles saying smoking doesn't lead to cancer and it's perfectly fine. Hell, I think it was like Steven Crowder who at one point said cigars are like whatever. That's totally different tangent I'd have to go on. So you can find studies to agree with you on basically any topic in the world. The question is, what do the majority of studies believe? And who made these studies? Who did these studies? What are the interests of the groups involved that perpetuated these studies, right? And what is the scientific consensus? And what JonTron put forward here wasn't, here is a scientific consensus and why we should re-examine this and da-da-da. It was, here's a bunch of article headlines, many of which are outdated, no sources, not telling you how these studies were done, and boom, there you go. But it was really fast and it had some music behind it, so it's convincing. That's what JonTron just did here. Now, I understand why JonTron did this, right? Because this is something that's really easy for someone to get caught up in and convinced, and maybe he was convinced. Now, personally, I would say that maybe JonTron should, if he wants to make it big in the COVID-19 grift game, he should continue doing it this way, because him getting into Discord calls with people to talk about politics, he does not have a great history with. So, while for my personal entertainment and for just general knowledge of everyone involved, I would love for him to go talk to Vosh or talk to me or talk to Destiny or talk to anyone about these posts. But most likely, for his own benefit, he's probably going to keep this on Twitter. JonTron versus Destiny round 2 for the next Hippy Dippy. My God, could you imagine if I was able to book that? There's no way. Vosh called him out yesterday. Oh yes, we do have that thread. So here's him. Imagine having a single inquiry regarding the science. And then Vosh points out the exact thing I was pointing out. I wasn't really convinced at first, but the article of 4 Japanese children dying to vaccine in 2011 has really changed my mind on the COVID vaccine. Thanks. True, that should not have been added to the compilation, but curious how you feel about this. Sweden halts use of Moderna COVID vaccines and under 30. Stockholm, Sweden Public Health Agency on Wednesday recommended a temporary halt to the use of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine among young adults, citing concerns over rare side effects to the heart. It said that the pause should initially be enforced until December 1st, explaining that it had received evidence of an increased risk of side effects, such as inflammation of the heart, muscles, and inflammation of the pericardium, whatever the hell that means. I feel like further research and adjustment is always warranted with regards to public health, but the evidence is clear. Taking the vaccine is far, far safer than getting COVID and reduces spread, which reduces further mutations, which helps end a pandemic. I would also like to state that this isn't Sweden bucking off the use of the vaccine. It's like, hey, we're going to take a step back. We're going to re-examine this when it comes to health issues and heart issues. But if the concern is heart issues, legitimately, if that is the concern, which I have no reason in the world to believe that JonTron isn't being 100% sincere with this. Okay, let me pull out like a little rose, a little ambassadorship to him of kindness and compassion, and say, you do know that when it comes to COVID, the long-term heart effects and health effects of COVID are much more severe than anything we've seen with the vaccine, including the effects on the heart. And many of the diseases that were being talked about that could rise, possibly, unconfirmed, with the vaccine, there are a lot higher likelihoods that you will get those same diseases if you just catch COVID. Because when people talk about COVID, they'll like talk about it like this. Particularly when it comes to children. COVID overall has like a 2% death rate or 1.5% death rate. And if you adjust it for age groups, it can be even less for the younger individuals. So what's the big concern? What's the big problem? And they'll never prefix that or add the asterisk at the end because this weakens the argument substantially. But there's also this caveat on the long-term health effects, not only on your lungs, but when it comes to your heart and when it comes to other parts of your body. There have been instances of people losing the ability, I believe it was even like things like small things like the ability to taste, which, well, isn't really a small thing, but isn't something that's going to put your life on the line later in life. Because people just want to talk about like COVID in the death or not death scenario, because that's what grabs headlines, right? This person died, and we all like, shock and awe, or this person's alive, and then we're like, okay, whatever, right? But when people have long-term health effects when it comes to their lungs, their heart, their general senses, nausea, different things like that, stuff that they're still trying to live with. There's been a lot of testimony about people who are struggling with the long-term health effects that we still don't properly know about, which is always, I think, a good counter for the argument of like, what about the long-term health effects of the vaccine? Okay, why is the long-term health effects of COVID never discussed? Anyway. I feel like further research and adjustment is always warranted with regards to public health, but the evidence is clear. Taking the vaccine is far, far safer than getting COVID. It reduces spread, which reduces further mutations, which helps end the pandemic. If heart inflammation, strokes, blood clots, etc., and people young and old is just an afterthought for you in future adjustment, maybe you're just not really out for the good of the public health after all. Okay, so I will never claim that Vosh is always acting in good faith. In fact, I've seen him engage in conversations many times in bad faith. Now, he will, of course, make the argument that it's strategic bad faith. Up until this point, Vosh was being nothing but good faith here. I mean, you could assume bad faith and assume intention, but I didn't see anything bad faith from Vosh here. And he didn't say anything unreasonable. So I don't know why assuming that he's really not out for the good of the public health. I don't know why we need to go there, but okay, whatever. But again, as I've discussed before, the long-term health effects of COVID have been so far shown to be much more severe, and many of the heart issues in particular, which is what this started with the Sweden example for earlier, have been shown to be more severe and more frequent when it comes to catching COVID. People want to put COVID in a box where this is what happens. You catch COVID, you die or you live. And you're much more likely to live, so who cares? Completely leaving out mutations, completely leaving out long-term health effects, and completely leaving out, and this is a big one, and this is an argument even like hardcore Republicans like Lindsey Graham has had to concede to, the overburdening of America's healthcare systems. It was Lindsey Graham at a Republican event of some sort. It was something in the backwoods of I forget exactly where. I think it was South Carolina. He was in South Carolina and he was talking to voters, most of which, by the way, were in their 60s or 70s. Geek, please message me about this. I'll send you the footage to put it about right here so people can see what I'm talking about on YouTube. Sorry for you Twitch viewers, you don't get that premium YouTube content. Gonna have to go to DylanBurnsTV on YouTube and get that content. But in that speech, he turns to the audience and he says, "Hey everyone, I got vaccinated. I think you all should get vaccinated." And then they start booing. They're like, boo, boo, the vaccine's not great. And then he responds to them like, okay, everybody, but just remember, I'm not saying you have to get it, but 92% of those in South Carolina hospitals are the unvaccinated. 92%. And then somebody in the audience just shouts, liar. I don't know why. This is probably the first time they've engaged with this data, but they just shouted liar at Lindsey Graham. 92%. That is an astonishing number. And numbers like that are grinding our public health employees and our healthcare workers to the bone in this country. And it's making it so people with completely preventable diseases and diseases that are completely treatable are dying because they can't get help because our hospitals are overflowing. And that's on top of the fact that there has been cases where there's video evidence to prove it, undisputable cases, where people have been stationed with IV bags in their arms outside the hospital because they just don't have enough space. So it's not only an issue of who lives and dies, it's also an issue of the long-term health effects that people are neglecting, and it's also an issue of mutations, and on top of everything, it's also an issue of our public health institutions and our healthcare system, which is being pushed to the brink right now. Want to go ahead and look up the global COVID death count for me, Slugger. Anyway, it was interesting. This isn't the only post JonTron made. If you go over here, you can see other posts he makes. It's the, the usual talking points that we've engaged with on this channel before. And we'll read his last message too, because I want to be as good faith as possible. Like, for example, the recent thing, which we haven't actually talked about on the channel yet, but we're going to, which shows that bipartisan legislators demand answers from Fauci on alleged puppy experiments. Now, again, this right here, which talks about an instance where I think it was 44 beagle puppies in South Africa were tested on when it comes to, I think it was vaccines. I have to double check to see if it had to do with COVID or not. I don't think it had to do with COVID. I think it had to do with something else, like microfibrosis or something. I forget. And there was government funds approved by Congress sent to said institution where this research was being done. Right? Now, I could say, my goodness, having their vocal cords removed so scientists could work without incessant barking, that's terrible. That's god awful. Really bad. Has nothing to do with trusting the science. Literally nothing. You can say that like a research institution is terrible or using awful ethical practices, but it has nothing to do with trusting the science. For example, if I pointed to a country and said, this country has terrible labor regulations and terrible rights for workers, that wouldn't be a counterpoint to this country has a strong economy. It still has a strong economy. Me bringing up that has nothing to do with the size or of its GDP or its consumer base at all. It's an ethical question, which should be answered, but has nothing to do with trusting the science. Roxworld, thank you so much for the Prime Gaming. I appreciate it. Also, I'm a cat person, so yeah. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay. Playing on the edge today. Playing on the edge. And of course, he ended this with a post saying, just to be clear, I'm not saying you shouldn't get vaccinated. That should be your choice. I'm also not saying the vaccine is unsafe. I want the best for everyone. I'm just concerned that the level of conformity around public discourse has reached dangerous levels. Stay safe. So, to be clear, and everything he's said about the vaccine so far, even the stuff that's not really about the vaccine, but is somehow related to the vaccine, I guess, because trust the science, bro. It has been points about why people shouldn't get vaccinated, or how dangerous the vaccine is, or how ineffective it is. I have yet to see him put forward a single post or anything about, hey, and here's all the data showing the vaccine is effective, even though the vast majority of the data of respectability that's out there shows the vaccine to be extremely effective. Extremely effective. And you don't even need to necessarily believe the studies to see that. You could just look at who's in the hospital right now. In South Carolina, 92% the unvaccinated. Why is that the case? I'm sure we can all put it together. I do trust the studies, but I trust my own eyes as well. But he hasn't put anything forward on the other side saying, well, here's why you should get vaccinated, or here's why the elderly should get vaccinated. He's put nothing forward on the other side. His only stuff talking about this has been stuff like this, trying to discredit the vaccine, saying it's ineffective or dangerous with articles from 2011. So I don't know if this is really about choice or saying you shouldn't get the vaccine. It seems everything he's put forward has been about why people should not get vaccinated. And then the second part here. I want the best for everyone. I'm just concerned that the level of conformity around public discourse has reached dangerous levels. Stay safe. Now, I do think that there's certain issues that if it was like that's if the stuff is extremely uniform, it might be an issue. For example, if we're all uniformly like we should support the war in Yemen, don't question anything, that would be a problem. But there's also things that are uniform because it's just fact-based reality, and rejecting said uniformity makes you, for lack of a better word, crazy. For example, flat Earth. Now, if JonTron went on Twitter and was like, it's not that I believe necessarily that the Earth is flat. I'm just saying I'm scared of the uniformity on the Earth globe to flat discourse. Or went on there like, I'm not saying the Rothschilds and George Soros control everything. I'm just saying that the uniformity and conformity around public discourse has reached dangerous levels. Or certain historical events that I don't want to go into because JonTron already doesn't have a good record when it comes to, race relations to be nice. So I'll just say, it's not that I don't believe the Armenian genocide didn't happen, right? I'm just saying. I'm just concerned with the level of conformity around public discourse has reached dangerous levels. Arguing or putting posts in favor of a certain position, definitely an extremely discredited one, cannot be justified by just saying, well, I just want to hear all the sides, or I just don't like how everybody agrees on this thing, or how everybody needs to conform on an issue. Well, maybe the public wants conformity on this, and the scientific community wants conformity on this because it's a public health issue, and the science is largely settled. That's why. There's certain issues we want conformity on. A great example would be like if somebody started coming out with a movement saying like drunk driving actually increases safety, or there's no problem with drunk driving. I would expect conformity around the issue and that person to be laughed out of the room because there's no evidence to substantiate that, and any study this person puts forward is most likely not going to come from reputablesource.com. It's going to be I love to run over children on the highway.net. Anyway, that's all I have to say about JonTron today. He should go back to like reviewing Sonic or whatever.